my name is Nicole, and today I have the wonderful V.E. Schwab with me, or Victoria Schwab, depending on what.
Depending on my mood that day, depending on which book I'm promoting. Mostly Victoria, though. I go by Victoria.
Okay. And recently published Conjuring of Light, the final book in the Shades of Magic series.
Yeah.
Can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
A little intimidated.
It's a little large.
I'm more intimidated just by the content. Should I be scared? Should I worry for the lives of all my favorite characters?
There is like a running kiss-kill count between me and my editor, so like there are tallies on both sides. Yeah, we'll advertise it.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have any advice for those of us going into the book? Should we be worried? Should we be touching our stuffed animals? And
no, I mean, I've all I can say is like a lot of heart and a lot of love went into it, and I knew exactly where I was going from the moment I started writing Darker Shade of Magic. I write my endings first, and so I plot in reverse. So I knew where it was going to end when I started the series. I've never been prouder of anything in my entire life, so I think go in like with some trust. Go in with trust. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but yeah, I think trust is the main thing I'm asking from my readers right now. Yeah, have faith. Yeah, I watch readers get to like certain parts, and then they send me gifs of them like laying down on the floor, and I'm like, just keep going though. Treat it as an experience. It has to be experienced in the whole.
Yeah, I know that's definitely kind of where I was at the end of the previous book. I was just like, you just sit in the corner and think about what you've done.
I will say though that Conjuring picks up the moment Gathering leaves off. So there's no skip forward. There's no jumps in time. Like it hits the ground running to the point where like we wrote the beginning of Conjuring of Light at the very same time as the end of Gathering of Shadows, and we just cut it. We chose exactly where we were going to cut it.
Nice. And that's one of the first times you've ever done like a big cliffhanger on a book. Yeah. Why did you decide to?
Because I could. Because I earned those points. No, but seriously, it was my 9th book, and it was my very first cliffhanger, and everyone else got to do cliffhangers, and I never did them, and so I stocked up my goodwill points, and I knew because of how the plot breaks down that there would be a cliffhanger. There was no way to actually end Gathering of Shadows without a cliffhanger. Yeah. It just became a matter of how severe do we make the cliffhanger, and believe it or not, the original cliffhanger was worse. Like, the original cliffhanger was definitely worse than the final cliffhanger. So whenever anyone gets mad about like that cliffhanger, I'm like, you guys, it could have been so much worse though. Nobody believes me, but my editor knows because she called me in like the middle of the night while I was living in Scotland and was like, hey, I want you to take a nap and then I want you to delete 10,000 words and like try to make this a little less horrible in terms of like hurting.
Well, our thanks to your editor.
My editor fought for it. Great, oh, it was so violent. It was so bad. I also was doing graduate school at the same time, and I kind of got it in my head. You know, they say in writing, like, and then everyone dies. Yeah. I, like, had a moment one night where it was just like, I'm just gonna kill everybody, and I killed, like, 90% of the cast. In like a single chapter, and then my editor was like, "Okay, honey, like we gotta take a step back from this, and we need you to get some sleep, and then we're gonna try it again."
So, you frequently post snippets on Twitter that are stressful as readers. How do you choose which snippets?
I choose the snippet that's gonna troll the reader the apps. No, I have an ongoing. If you follow me at all online, like you should know this at this point. Yeah. I love trolling readers. Yeah. It's my favorite thing to do. It is done with love. Yeah. But I will favorite a thing just to stress the poster out. If I post a snippet, it's 99% of the time taken out of context. And it's taken out of very important context clues in order to make it either seem very different or much better or much worse. Yeah. So I love taking really innocuous pieces of the book and posting them without any context because they turn horrible. They turn horrible. So no, I am like quite actively always trolling readers that way.
So you're mean to us but in like a loving way.
It's a loving kind of cruelty. I do it though because it's fun. I do it because also then people are like, oh, no spoilers. And I'm like, I guarantee you that scene or that moment or that line that I posted did not happen the way that you think it happens. You know? 99% of the time. And I do that so that every now and then I can post something genuine and people won't believe it. Like, I posted a kissing snippet one time and people were convinced somehow I had like turned this kissing snippet, like it had been cut out of a murder scene or something. They just were like, I don't trust you anymore. I was like, literally, it's just a kissing snippet. But they were like, no. You've done something wrong. You've done something terrible, and you've just couched it in this weird way.
You know, honestly, at this point, I feel like nothing you do would surprise me.
I just do it to keep everyone on their toes.
It keeps things interesting.
Exactly.
So I know there's probably not a lot you can share.
Nope.
But with, in regards to the third archived book and the Vicious sequel, is there anything you can share? I know there's probably
there's no update on the third archive book. That's a really difficult situation, and it just takes some time, unfortunately. Like, it's not just about me and my story and publishing it. Publishing is a messy, tangled web, and so unfortunately I have to be very careful about how that third book comes out, because I'm under contract to a different publisher now, and there's contracts and things like that. I'm still fully intending that The Return will come out at some point, but it's one of those things where every single time I post good news on the internet, people are like, but what about Archive 3? And I'm like, shh. If I had something to say, I would tell you. For Vicious, though, the sequel, Vengeful, comes out in 2019. And that sounds like a really far time, but I also, like, I've put out 2 books a year for the last 3 years, and I desperately need to catch up.
Yeah.
Like, I need some time to just sit down and write. So I think I have 3 books coming out in 2019.
That's a lot.
Because of that, I have 0 YA. I have a middle grade series, but I have no YA or adult books coming out in 2018. So Vengeful, the follow-up to Vicious, which I'm so excited about, because I've been working on it since Vicious finished, will come out in 2019.
Right. It's exciting. Although it's good to, like, give yourself a bit of a break.
It's like, the weird thing is, right, I call it a break. It's not a break for me.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I'm just going to be writing, like, 3 to 4 books in 2018. I just need the time to write.
Yeah.
It's a reading break for everyone, but books take actual time to write.
Yeah. And it'll give you a break from all, like, the author events and publicity.
That's really the break that I need. I love meeting readers. It is my favorite part of what I do, besides actually putting pen to paper. Like, writing is very solitary, and I love doing events, but I did 85 last year. That's average one every 3.5 to 4 days.
It's a lot.
And I couldn't write because I was continuously traveling. And so for me right now, once I get through our Dark Duet this summer, I'm taking a break.
It's good. let yourself have that time.
I need a nap. I need, like, 6 months uninterrupted work time. But I promise it'll be worth it in 2019 and 2020.
All right, and the very important question.
Yeah.
If you had Kel's coat, what would you turn it to?
What I'm wearing right now.
It's a good coat.
Kel's coat's my nod to the Room of Requirement in Harry Potter. Like, it's a coat that is what you need it to be. But it's really just also my excuse to buy fabulous outerwear to celebrate that series. But no, for me, the coat that he wears, that's the black and silver military button, double line, that's the coat it was based on a coat I owned. I loved it. All of my coats are black and silver buttons, so yeah, that's my coat.
So I feel like, at least from a reader perspective, one of the things that you're really, really good at is the world building.
Oh, thank you.
And if I recall, you've talked before at events about how that's one of the things you sort of start with. How do you approach that? Because I feel like that's something that can be very intimidating for young writers, because it's such a big thing.
I mean, for me, it's the ground on which everything's built in the most literal sense. I write primarily about outsiders. In order to understand outsiders, you have to understand insiders. In order to understand insiders, you have to understand the world that they exist within. So for me, it's my first fabric. It's the thing that I have to do before anything else really gets layered down. So I spend a lot of time on it before I ever put pen to paper for the book itself. And I know a lot of authors will go the reverse way. They'll kind of leave the world roughed in until the very end. But for me, I want my world to feel like a character. So in order for setting to feel like a character, you have to start there. You have to really make it the foundation on which everything else is built. And I do it with language, and I do it with food and culture and idiomatic expressions and poems and songs. Like, I try to build a fabric. I try to build a world that's believable.
Right.
You know? And the trick is obviously to use as little as possible to tell as much as possible. And that just comes with practice. Like, it's just one of those things that you overtell and then you learn how to call back from there. And every author will lean in a different way. For me, it's language. Like, that is because language, not only differentiates insider and outsider, the fact that like Lila doesn't speak the language in Red London or anything like that, but it also delineates society. So there's a different language and different dialects in upper class society as there are from lower class society. There's different phrases and sayings in the taverns than there would be in the palace, and so I think that's my cheat code. But different authors have totally different cheat codes.
Yeah, whatever. I think
whatever works for you.
Yeah. With this Savage song,
Yeah.
love it, by the way.
Thank you.
And I think one of the things that makes it stand out is the fact that it's not a romance. And I think that there's obviously the dynamic between Kate and August. A lot of other authors, other contexts would have made it a romance. What made you decide to not make it a romance?
I think you can have tension without romance, and I think that, I mean, I love a good romance, but as a writer, I'm less interested in romance than I am in other kinds of relationships. I love family, and I love antagonist and adversary, and I love people who are forced together. Both Kel and Lila in the Shades of Magic series, and August and Kate in the Savage Song are forced together.
Yeah.
You know, and they kind of have to learn how to operate together. It would have felt disingenuous to make it a romance when the stakes and other things that are happening in their world are so high.
Yeah.
I think it would have pulled the reader out of the narrative if the world was literally ending and they were like, but time out, let's just kiss for a bit, you know? I will say there is a kiss in our dark duet, and it makes me so happy because it's the most awkward thing in the entire world. Like, everything goes wrong. Like, I like love telling people that there is a kiss because it's just nothing goes the way you think it's going to go in that scene. And that was my one rule. I was like, at some point I knew I wanted a kiss, and I knew that it could not, like, this was not a kiss which then transformed into romance between the two of them. But yeah, I think I just like playing with other kinds of relationship, and I don't think it's given enough space in contemporary sometimes, but it's so rarely given enough space in fantasy.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why we oversimplify these relationships in fantasy. So for me, I knew going into it, and bless Green Willow and HarperCollins, because I went in expecting to be told, like, you need romance. You need that kind of tension in that book. And I was really ready to fight for it, and they never did. They were with me from page one in terms of it being completely unnecessary to that story, and I get a lot of readers who are grateful that it's an aromantic narrative, you know?
Yeah, I feel like, especially in YA, it's such, like, every single story has a romance. Not that there's anything wrong with having romance.
There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the only kind of relationship.
Yeah, it's nice to focus on other kinds of relationship, but it's kind of a breath of fresh air.
Well, thank you.
That's good.
I say that I come at it from a very dark place in Dark Duet right now because I'm in the midst of editing, and editing is just a brutal headspace to be in. So I'm in a very, like, fragile state with our Dark Duet. But thank you.
Well, what you've done so far with the rest of the rest of your work is wonderful.
Thank you.
Speaking of relationships, is there a dynamic between particular characters that you find just really, really fun to write?
Yes, Kel and Alucard. There's a dynamic between Rye's brother and the main character, Kel, and Alucard Emery, Rye's ex-boyfriend. And essentially, like, the gist of it is that Alucard broke Rye's heart, and therefore he is dead to Kel. And, like, I have never had so much fun. I always joke that Conjuring is death and witty banter, but, like, I've never had so much fun when you put the two of them in a room together. The most interesting thing is that normally in a book, a main character has a foil. It's a single character, usually, that kind of butts heads with them. Every single character in the Shades of Magic series is Kel's foil. Like, he butts heads with Lila, he butts heads with Rye, he butts heads with his parents, he butts heads with Alucard, like, he butts heads with Holland. Like, there's literally no character that Kel is not great with. But in terms of which one is the most fun, I, like, anytime you put Kel and Alucard in a room together, I have so much fun with the two of them. Like, I get delighted by the mere prospect. Those are my favorite scenes to write, are the really awkward, it happens in Gathering of Shadows. I think it's Lila runs into Kel, and the two of them run into Rye, and then the three of them run into Alucard, and it's just immediately, like, the visceral tension between the fact that Kel and Alucard are in the same space, and there's a similar context in Conjuring where several characters who should never be in the same room together end up stuck on a boat together.
Ooh.
And it was the most fun I've ever had. Like, the world is falling apart around them, but put Kel and Alucard on a boat together and everything goes wrong.
You've talked before about things like some of the darker political climate and things inspiring this Savage song.
Yeah.
Is there anything going on that is sparking anything that you might sort of file away for a future project? Or
That's a good question. I mean, right now I'm still so into this
Mm-hmm.
Savage song because of our dark duet. And really, our dark duet, the same way that the Savage song looks at violence in our society, our dark duet looks a lot at outsiders and like our fear of refugee culture, our fear of not letting people in, not willing to take them on. After the events in this Savage song, the line between North and South Verity is collapsing, and a lot of people in South Verity don't want to help the people that are trapped on the north side of the city because they feel like they got themselves into it, like it's not their problem, they've been there. And so there is still that same sense of, like, that series in particular really looks at very current themes.
So
Yeah.
unfortunately, maybe you have a bit too much inspiration for that right now.
I was gonna say, it's a little too timely, and I mean, when I sat down to write this Savage song, I really hoped that by the time it was published, the issue would be a bit more in the past tense instead of it being, I mean, I started it 2 years before it came out, and so I kind of, it was very naive of me, but I harbored a hope that it would be a slightly more in retrospect, and obviously it's not, and I don't go into those books with the intention of analyzing a present issue. It just seems to be unfolding that way, and it finds a lot of parallels in the world.
And I think the idea of fiction as a sort of reflection of our own world is an interesting one, because I feel like there's this debate between fiction as a examination and reflection of our own world and fiction as a form of escapism.
Yeah, it can be both, though.
Yeah, I
Like,
think it's
it can
important
be
to
both.
find the balance.
It can be both in a single book, or it can be both in two different books, and it can be whatever that person needs it to be. You know, there are some people who, in order to escape, want to go into a world that looks nothing like their own, and there are some people who really need to look into fiction and see themselves. You know, and the needs vary completely based on the reader. And so I think that there are going to be readers for whom, that's why there's no book to suit everyone, right? For me, I like fantasy, I like escapism, and I like having a door into another world. So contemporary realism is the harder sell for me. But I have a ton of readers who respond to the Savage song and to August specifically because they feel like outsiders in their own bodies or in their own lives, and they want to see that that's happening to somebody else as well. So I just think it varies depending on the needs of the reader at the time. That's also why sometimes it's not the right time to read a specific book, because of your needs might change.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of part of that discussion is the issue of representation and the importance of representation in books. And I think you've done a pretty good job of that. I mean,
Well, thank
I
you.
think reading A Dark Shade of Magic for the first time and seeing Rye as a character, it was, not only is he, first of all, a male bisexual character, which is unfortunately very rare in fiction, but he's, you know, someone in a position of power, and he's a fairly prominent character.
Yeah. I mean, there is, and this is something that's assessed a bit more in Conjuring of Light, he does have a modicum of privilege, right? He is allowed to sleep with who he wants with fairly little repercussion, just because he is a prince as well. But it also was really important to me that, you know, his main issue has nothing to do with his sexuality. It has to do with the fact he doesn't have magic. That's the object of importance in their world, not whether you're a man or a woman or who you choose to be with. That's just not the guiding principle. And the issue of representation is a really tricky one, because, you know, we get into these conversations a lot about this idea of the lane, like stay in your lane, right in your lane, things like that. And I think the really key difference is you want, as an author, you want readers to see themselves in the character. So while I'm never going to write a narrative from the perspective of someone whose life I can't relate to, or who I'm not entitled to that narrative, what I can do is make sure that readers of different races and sexualities, etc., see themselves represented some way on the page. That's what my goal is. I just want them to see that they have a place in that world, and a major place. Like, that's the thing, Rye's not a throwaway character. Rye is one of the main characters of the series. It would be very easy to do cast-off characters and be like, oh, but you can see yourself in this world, it's right over there in the corner, super shrunk down, you just have to use a magnifying glass. Like, no, I wanted characters to be front and center, because that's important to me. Like, I'm bi, I never see it in books, and when you do see sexuality represented, there's a problem in that we have to see them on a pedestal. If you do see a queer person in a book, they better be like the best possible representation of that person. And like Rye is super flawed.
Yeah.
He's super flawed because he's a 20-year-old boy who is also a major prince and given whatever he wants. And I remember some early reviewers would conflate his flaws with his sexuality, and I'm like, these are not the same thing. Like, he doesn't, just because I have a bi character in my series doesn't mean he has to be like the most picture perfect, you know, never makes a mistake. That's the problem, and it's really an indicator that we just don't have enough representation in books, because if we had enough of it, not everyone would have to stand on a pedestal all the time, you know? So for better or for worse, I was like, Rye's a person.
Yeah.
He's going to make bad choices. Those bad choices are not because he's queer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot of feelings.
No, I completely agree. It's important to have the whole spectrum of queer characters, and enough that one representative of some identity doesn't have to represent the entire
Well,
identity.
you're asking them to take on way too much weight.
Yeah.
You're asking them to carry too much. If you only have one character of a kind in your book, that's not fair. Like, it's not fair, because you're giving everyone else as a full cast, and yet so you can explore flaws in a really dynamic way, and then you have one queer character or one black character or one character that doesn't fit the mold of the rest of the set, and suddenly all of everything that happens to that character is going to be outweighed.
Right. I want to make sure you have time to do
Yes.
other interviews and you have some space to breathe before your event.
What is breathing? What is this thing? Is it like sleeping? Because people keep talking about
you don't
sleeping.
need to breathe or sleep.
I don't know what the sleep thing is that people keep saying, but it sounds nice.
Yeah, hypothetically, you know. All right, so like I said, Conjuring of Light is out now. It's an amazing series. Highly recommend. Go pick it up. Do you have anything you would like to say to the internet?
No, just thank you. The internet has been very good to me on the whole. I mean, just thanks for sticking with me on this journey.
All right, thanks for watching. I love you, and I will see you later. Bye.